Hey, y'all, picture this a glitzy ballroom in downtown Chicago, chandeliers dripping with crystal, catching the light like 1,000 tiny stars, the kind of place where the air smells like money and ambition. That's where we find Mia, 25, moving through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes, her black and white server uniform crisp but plain, her dark hair tied back in a tight ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just her, quiet, unassuming, but with this understated grace that you'd only notice if you really looked. And let me tell you, nobody in that room was looking, not at first, anyway. They were too busy laughing, sipping overpriced wine, and throwing shade at the girl they thought didn't belong. Mia wasn't just any server, though. She grew up in a family that owned half the real estate in this city, raised with the kind of discipline that taught her to keep her head down, let her actions do the talking. Her dad used to say, "Power doesn't scream, Mia, it stands." She took that to heart, but tonight, that choice made her a target. She was here to work, to blend in, to help out at this high-stakes gala for a multi-billion-dollar real estate deal, but to these people, the investors, the socialites, the power players, she was just the help, someone to mock, someone to make themselves feel bigger than. And the worst part? The deepest cut came from someone she trusted, her cousin, Lauren. It started small. Mia was weaving through the crowd, pouring wine, clearing plates, her steps careful, her hands steady. The room was buzzing, men in tailored suits with cufflinks that cost more than her rent, women in gowns that shimmered like liquid gold, their laughter sharp, their eyes sharper. Lauren was there, draped in a sapphire dress, her blonde hair catching the light, laughing loud with a group of developers. Mia and Lauren grew up together, shared secrets in their family's sprawling lakefront mansion, but tonight, as Mia passed by with her tray, Lauren leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. "Watch out, folks, she might spill and ruin your vibe." The table erupted, heads turning, eyes locking on Mia. Her chest tightened, her breath catching, but she kept moving, her tray steady. Lauren met her eyes for a split second, just long enough to twist the knife, then turned away, sipping her drink like nothing happened. That betrayal, man, it burned deeper than any stranger's jab. The hits kept coming. A woman in a ruby-red gown, her lips painted to match, grabbed Mia's arm as she refilled a glass. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, loud enough to draw a crowd. "You're trying so hard, but this isn't your scene. Stick to something simpler." The people around her smirked, one guy adjusting his tie like he was above it all, but loving every second. Mia gently pulled her arm free, her eyes flicking up to meet the woman's, steady, unflinching. The woman's smile wavered, just for a moment, before she laughed it off, turning to her friends. "No class, either," she said, her voice carrying. Mia adjusted her tray, her fingers brushing the edge, and kept moving, the weight of their laughter pressing against her back like a physical thing. Then there was this guy, mid-40s, slick back hair, old money vibes, leaning back in his chair, smirking. "Careful, girl," he called out as she poured his wine. "That bottle's worth more than your paycheck." His buddies roared, one slapping the table like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Mia's hand stayed steady, pouring slow and precise, her face a mask of calm. He wasn't done. "What's your name, anyway? You look like you got lost on your way to the suburbs." The laughter spread, sharp, cruel. Mia set the bottle down, her fingers lingering on the label, and said nothing. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was strength, coiled tight, waiting. Across the room, a woman in an emerald dress, her nails manicured to perfection, leaned forward, her voice loud and theatrical. "Why is she even here? She's clearly out of her depth. Look at her, standing there like a lost kid." The room chuckled, some clapping like it was a show. Mia's hand paused on a folded napkin, straightening it with deliberate care, as if it was the only thing that mattered. The woman raised an eyebrow, expecting a reaction, but Mia just turned away, her steps measured, her silence louder than their jeers. The room was turning into a battlefield, every glance a dart, every whisper a blade, but Mia had been taught to stand tall, no matter the storm. So she did. Then the air shifted. Enter Ms. Sato, a real estate titan from Tokyo, sweeping into the room like she owned it, and honestly, she probably could. Her silk kimono shimmered with gold thread, her presence silencing the chatter like a switch had been flipped. At 42, she was a legend, the kind of woman who could tank a market with a single phone call. People sat up straighter, voices dropped, eyes followed her every move. She took her seat at the head table, her assistant trailing with a leather binder. Mia watched from the corner of her eye, refilling water glasses nearby. She'd heard of Ms. Sato. Her family's boardroom talks were full of her name, a force you didn't cross. Now here she was, raising a glass, her gaze sweeping the room. Then she spoke, her voice clear, deliberate, every word in Japanese. Who here is sharp enough to close this deal with me? The room froze. Forks clinked against plates. A few people coughed, shifting in their seats. Nobody answered. The businessmen, so loud moments ago, stared at their napkins, whispering, "What did she say?" One guy's face flushed, his tie suddenly too tight. Mia stood by the wall, her tray empty now, watching the room unravel. Nobody understood, not the guy with the cufflinks, not the woman in the red dress, not even Lauren, who was fidgeting with her bracelet, avoiding Miss Sato's gaze. The silence stretched, heavy, awkward. Then the slick-back hair guy turned to Mia, his smirk back in place, sensing a chance to feel big again. "What are you standing there for?" he snapped, loud enough to turn heads. "Don't tell me you understand her." The table laughed, nervous now. A younger guy, buzzcut, tech bro energy, leaned forward, banging his fist on the table. "If this server speaks Japanese, I'll get down on my knees right here." The room roared, the sound swallowing Mia whole. She didn't move, but her fingers curled slightly, her nails pressing into her palms. Then she spoke. Mia lifted her head, her eyes blazing, and answered Ms. Sato in perfect Japanese. "You asked who's capable of closing this deal. I can translate, if you'd like." The room went dead silent. A glass slipped from someone's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Ms. Sato's eyes lit up, a small smile tugging at her lips. "At last," she said, her voice warm but firm. "Someone understands." The businessmen froze, mouths half open. The woman in the red dress blinked, her earrings swaying as she stared. Lauren's glass trembled in her hand, her eyes glued to her plate. Mia stood there, her hands still, her gaze locked on Ms. Sato. The moment hung there, fragile, electric. "Ms. Sato leaned forward, her kimono catching the light, and spoke again, this time in Japanese, her words thick with complex real estate jargon terms that made boardrooms sweat. The hall looked around, helpless, their confidence crumbling like dry sand. Mia didn't hesitate. She translated, her voice sharp, precise, every term perfect, flowing like she'd been born to it. Miss Sato nodded, her eyes sparkling. "Perfect," she said, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. The guy with the cufflinks looked away, his face pale. The woman in the red dress sank back in her chair, her smile gone. The room felt colder now, the laughter replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable quiet. But the mockery didn't stop, not yet. The slick-back hair guy found his voice, his tone sharp with desperation. "Impossible," he shouted, his face red. "She probably memorized a few lines, that's all." The woman in the red dress chimed in, her voice high, brittle. "She got lucky, nothing more." A few others joined in, their laughter forced, clinging to their arrogance like a lifeline. "Don't let a server embarrass us," one said, his voice shaking. Mia's fists clenched, but she didn't move. Her silence was enough, her eyes steady, her calm a wall they couldn't break. Halfway through the night, as Mia cleared a plate, a man in a charcoal suit, glasses low on his nose, leaned back and whispered loudly, "Bet she's just parroting what someone fed her." His neighbor, a woman with a sleek bob and a diamond brooch, laughed sharply. "Imagine a server thinking she's part of this deal," she said, her eyes flicking to Mia with disdain. Mia's hand paused on the plate, her fingers brushing the rim, but she didn't look up. She stacked another plate, her movements deliberate, each action a quiet defiance. The man raised his glass, toasting his own cleverness, but his hand shook slightly when Mia's gaze passed over him, calm, piercing, like she'd seen his insecurity laid bare. Ms. Sato watched it all, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, her kimono flowing like a river of silk, and spoke in English. "She's the one I choose as my interpreter and advisor for this deal." The room went still. A few businessmen gasped, one covering his mouth. The tech bro guy sank into his chair, his face ashen. Lauren's glass trembled, her eyes wide. Mia didn't react. She just nodded, a small, controlled movement, and stepped closer to Ms. Sato's table, her tray set aside. The chaos erupted again, but it was weaker now, desperate. A man in a pinstriped suit, his ego bruised, pushed forward. Even if she's skilled, she's still just a server worth nothing, he spat, his voice cracking. A woman with gleaming pearls screamed, "This is absurd." The shouts spread, a last-ditch effort to hold on to their pride. Mia stood there, her hands folded, her gaze steady. She didn't flinch, didn't answer, just let their words crash against her like waves against a cliff. Then James walked in. Mia's husband, tall, his suit understated but sharp, his presence quiet but undeniable. He didn't need to announce himself. His name carried weight in circles these people only dreamed of touching. He moved through the crowd, his steps calm, his eyes finding Mia. He stopped beside her, his hand brushing her elbow, a small gesture that said everything. The guy with the cufflinks froze, his glass halfway to his mouth. The woman in the red dress turned away, her earrings still. Lauren's face went pale, her bracelet slipping to the table with a soft clink. Nobody spoke. The room felt smaller, the chandeliers dimmer. Miss Sato glanced at James, a small nod passing between them. Mia didn't look at him, didn't need to. She adjusted her stance, her shoulders relaxing, her hand brushing her apron. The deal was done, the papers signed, but the real shift was in the room. Mia wasn't just a server anymore. One last voice broke through. A man in a navy blazer, his face flushed with indignation, stood, his chair tipping slightly. "This can't be serious," he said, his voice trembling. "You're telling me this server is going to represent $1 billion deal?" He gestured wildly at Mia, his watch glinting. The room murmured, a few heads nodding. Mia didn't flinch. She reached for a stray napkin, folding it with precision, her hands steady, his words just background noise. "MS." Sato raised an eyebrow, her gaze shutting him down, and he sat, his bluster fading. The fallout was swift. The guy with the cufflinks got a call the next morning. His firm dropped him, his name gone from their roster. The woman in the red dress woke to a viral post, her cruel words quoted online, her reputation in tatters. The tech bro guy lost his biggest investor, his pitch deck suddenly irrelevant. Lauren faced her own reckoning. Her family, Mia's family, cut her from the next board meeting, no explanation needed. The man in the navy blazer saw his company's stock dip after a leaked video of his outburst spread. No drama, just reality catching up, quiet and inevitable. Mia didn't stay to watch it unfold. She left the hall that night, her apron folded, her steps steady, James a step behind. She didn't turn back for apologies, didn't linger for the gasps. She walked into the Chicago night, the city lights bouncing off wet pavement, the air cool against her skin. She didn't gloat, didn't need to. Her silence carried more weight than their words ever could. She'd stood her ground, not with anger, but with grace, and that was enough. The headlines hit the next day. Server translates Billionaire's Japanese, flips $1 billion deal. The story spread, shared across platforms, quoted in boardrooms. People talked about Mia, the girl who turned a room upside down without raising her voice. But she didn't read the articles, didn't check the comments. She was already moving on, her life quiet again, her dignity intact. Years ago, her dad had told her, sitting in their library, "Never let them see you sweat, Mia." She'd been 16, her sneakers scuffed, her hair a mess, listening as he talked about power, about carrying it without flaunting it. That lesson carried her through that night, through the laughter, through the betrayal. It carried her now as she paused at a street corner, buying a single sunflower from a vendor, tucking it into her bag, a small gift to herself. This story's for anyone who's ever been looked down on, judged, silenced. You stood tall when they tried to make you small, held your ground when they laughed. You weren't wrong, you weren't alone, and your strength carried you, just like Mia's did. So, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you faced betrayal or proved someone wrong. Was it a family member, a coworker, a stranger? What kept you going? Hit that like button if this hit home, and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories that remind us we're not alone. Let's talk about what's fair, what's right, and how we rise above the noise.